with Lauren Betts, right before the NCAA tournament, after the selection show, I made a really big mistake publicly on our selection show. And it wasn't a press conference, but in the interactions with the reporters, and I messed up. I allowed them to be privy to a conversation that was just between her and I, and it was a big mistake on my part. And she did not talk to me the next day, and she was so angry with me, and she had every right to be.
So so
But
so you so you shared a conversation in an answer?
yeah, so it was one of those big events with all of our donors, but there just happened to be reporters there too. So I was not in the mindset of it's a press conference, but
Right.
I lost track that I was trying to connect with our fans. So I was interacting with questions, and they were asking me about a matchup which it didn't even end up happening, but with LSU, that would have been the third time we match up with them. And they said, how do you feel about that? And I said, well, actually, Lauren and I were having a conversation, and that's the matchup we wanted. Well, she ended up getting really cyber bullied by it was really some nasty stuff that was going on. And the fact that I brought that on by a lack of self-control of what I said I was so wrong. But what ensued, and then I'm thinking, here we are going into the biggest NCAA tournament, and I might have just screwed it up with our best player. And I went to her, and we just had to have a real heart to heart, and I just had to really eat my humble pie and say I was wrong, and I need to humbly ask for your forgiveness. And the fact that I would bring that kind of pain to you is devastating to me. And so, but it's one of those examples, and I can't fake it. It has to be real, and sometimes I don't get it right, and I have to really trust. My mom used to say, you have to have 100 deposits in of the mundane, just day-to-day commitments to have enough credibility to survive the one really hard thing. And thankfully, I had enough deposits that I could recover with Lauren, but it was something I really had to take responsibility for. But it underscored for me, it can't be about what I say. It has to be about how I live.
Yeah. You remember earlier, we were talking about, when you have a conversation with John Wooden, do the maxims does he lead with them? No, you said they flow into conversation. You're a good disciple because they flow into the conversation so beautifully.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking to
Mm,
Coach Wooden in so many
mm,
good ways.
thank
Um,
you.
something I think I wrestle with Coach Saban, all his success at Alabama. I was fortunate to work for him for a couple of years with the Dolphins, and he talked a lot about process. And then he had so many coaches go on to be head coaches, and everybody talked about process over results and all of that. And he always talked about an experience he had when he was at Michigan State and how he
Yeah.
was very results oriented and how that changed at that point. He completely changed his philosophy. Coach Wooden never talked about winning. Bill Walsh's book is The Score Takes Care of Itself. Saban is process over results. Do you talk about that day one meeting at UCLA? Do you stand in the front and say, hey, our goal is to be the national champion? Or do you just say,
Absolutely.
okay, can you talk me through that little conundrum?
Well, I mean, it's hard and I think it gets harder and harder because social media, is comes into play. There's just so many aspects that are pulling on these kids' attention. Their agents, the money, the publicity, every little thing is just so intensified. And you probably are used to that in the NFL. Now the way it's come into college is really a different thing. And especially even for women. I mean, we're in a different era now. So there are definitely different things, but I still am just as committed to that. And I think you have to start with that foundational principle. I mean, you just named some of the most successful coaches across sports in our history. And I always say to our team, look, that it sure didn't hurt them, did it? Like, look, there's a theme. Success leaves clues. And the clues are that actually outcomes and results are a distraction from actually doing what you need to do that lead to winning. And so, and we just set before them, look, John Gordon would come into many, I'm sure you've probably heard this, but he goes into a lot of NFL locker rooms or college football before the year, and he has everybody write down on a piece of paper what their goals are, what they want. And, it's to be a Pro Bowler, to win the Super Bowl, to, fill in all those blanks. And then he says, I've been in X amount of locker rooms saying the same speech. How many of those are different from locker room to locker room? And they're like, not many. Let's throw them all out, throw them in there. And now let's write down our commitments. Let's write down what process we're committed to living in and through. And, that's really what it comes down to. So we sit down the very first, usually we go on a team retreat and we talk about what do we want to get accomplished and what are our objectives. And what can get in the way of those? What are our biggest dangers that we need to guard against? And then we reverse engineer what it's going to take from a process perspective to get there. And then we never talk about the objectives again the rest of the year.